right? Like before the printing press, you the propaganda was like, hey, you have the church or the king has like a dude that stands in the middle of town and yells at people, right?
The Herald.
And that was yeah, or like the town crier or whatever you want to call him. That was like the main means of getting information out there. You had like bards that would sing songs and shit, right? So we invent the printing press when in like somewhere between I think that was 1400. I'm going to confirm that.
Okay, we are officially live on
1440.
Twitch,
Yeah,
by the way.
1440.
We're officially eating.
We are officially yeeting on the Twitch. So welcome, Twitch fam. If you're watching, hop in discord.gg/tribal, where we have business community discussions like this every day. It's been said that it's some of the best business community discussions that you could possibly have. I've heard some people say that. It's unconfirmed, not official, but I think it's pretty darn good and beneficial for you if you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, anyone trying to do business. Having a community like this that cares is really important. All these people care. Claire cares, Garrett cares, BU cares, Tabalo cares. We yeet each and every day here in Triba. Every day there's a workshop or something going on in the chats. Wednesdays are Philosophy Day. Philosophy Club was spawned out of Garrett Daly's business, which is all about branding, mission, vision, value, the philosophy of creating your brand and your personality. And he does an incredible job at it. He is the reason White Rabbit, I think, is so poignant in its messaging. The reason Triba's branding has stood out and is one of the best business discords out there. He's the reason Yeatum has such a great philosophy as well. And he's helped Clara. I don't know if he's helped BU yet, but she's kind of new to the Tribe Discord, and I hope she does get benefit out of this club. But anyways, one of our favorite sessions with Garrett Daly. Go check out Ion Enterprises at ion.enterprises, right? I have like
Ion.enterprises.
Yeah, ion.enterprises. AION. Sweet. All right, Garrett. So we were going to talk about what now today?
We're going to talk about, I guess, the press. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, the philosophy of educating the public on a wartime environment.
I mean, we could just call that propaganda. We'll talk about the philosophy of propaganda because that's real.
Yeah,
you're right. For better or for worse, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, literally.
So basically, before the 1400s, there was, the printing that was done was written by hand. Reading was not something that literacy is not universal or even very common. Literacy was generally reserved for like the priest class, the ruling class. Scholars may have fallen in with those groups, but that's pretty much it, right? So for the average person, you had information dissemination, if you want to call it that, was basically achieved by, oral traditions like, hey, we have such and such religion, we have such and such culture, you teach that to your kids. Or you have people who are like shouting in the public square, like the king says, hey, guess what, here's an edict, everybody is speaking French now, right? Or everybody's using the Julian calendar instead of the whatever calendar, right? This changes with the advent of the printing press. That makes things substantially easier to get information in the hands of regular people. The printing press is essential to the American Revolution because in the American Revolution you have pamphlets and writs and other little tracts, treatises they're being written and distributed by people like Thomas Paine, the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, everybody. They were throwing out all of this kind of stuff. And that was an important part of the propaganda push, right? This is kind of the advent of, there's propaganda for a long time, but this is one of the first print-driven propaganda pushes that ever happened. It was important because the reason why America won the American Revolution is not specifically because we had a better military, which we did not. It's not because we were better funded. We were not. It's because
of the French.
Partially, but it was ultimately because the war was too unpopular and too expensive for England to continue. Very much like the America in Iraq, America in Vietnam. The thing that happens when a big country fights a little country and their resistance force, that you can't like convince them to quit, right? You're like, hey, we actually don't really care that much. We're over here, but it's not super emotional for us. Like, why is America in Iraq and Afghanistan? You could debate it. Nobody really knows. Hey, the Afghanis, like, ask them, why are you fighting the Americans? It's like, oh, well, because this is our home, and you have all these good reasons to fight, right? The Americans don't really have that. And similarly, England didn't really have that with America back in the Revolution, right? So all the while, they're making this strong case. They're, the government is kind of being created through through writing a lot of the stuff. Like if you look at the Federalist Papers that Hamilton and some of the other people wrote, there's this huge press element. There's this writing element that goes into it. And you can kind of see, after the American Revolution, over the course of the 1800s, the development of journalism, with like the yellow journalists, Hearst, and advent of who's the other one? It's Hearst and like print-driven propaganda pushes that ever happened. It was important because the thing.
Hamilton had one. Did Franklin have one?
Had what?
Are you talking about the OG media people?
No, in the 1800s, you had the yellow journalists who were these like the original tabloids. Pulitzer. It was Pulitzer and Hearst, which is funny that we have the Pulitzer Prize, right? Is actually a guy who was just a degenerate, terrible journalist, right? So that was kind of the 1800s. You start seeing just like trash, garbage journalism, and people pretty much will believe whatever you give them. This is a universal rule. People are not critical thinkers normally, and also don't want to think critically. They are not inclined to do it, which is unfortunate, but that's just a fact, right? Look at the big debate right now over like misinformation and fake news, all these things. It's like, well, okay, you have people who are putting out stuff that nobody checks, and then you have another group of people who are saying, oh, well, that stuff is, you don't have to look into it because we looked into it for you and it's fake. It's like, okay, well, how are you supposed to know what's true at all, right? I think that's the big question of our lifetimes. It's like, what is truth? How do you know? Do you just agree that the news sources are trustworthy? Do you agree that the people checking the news sources are trustworthy? So that brings us to the question of the war, right? Right now,
I want to add one piece of commentary to what you're pointing out exactly, because a lot of the narrative when they say, hey, let's trust these media organizations and these media syndicates, that they're trained in the editorial disciplines, like collecting information from human sources or whatever that is. There's a big difference between how you see journalism and information in the media, academic, liberal arts context, and versus how you see media and content in like the data science or information science context. So this is a big distinction I like to always bring into it, because we're talking about orders of magnitude in different like systemic and meta-analysis and capabilities to do that.
Can you rephrase that question or ask that question differently?
It's not a question. I just wanted to add, like, if you ask a data scientist or an information scientist versus a journalist, what is true or false, they're going to think of it, they're trained differently.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the first thing. This is something that if anybody who's been in Philosophy Club for long enough has heard me talk about 100 times, but there are people use the word truth to describe two separate things that are related but different, right? There is objective truth and there is subjective truth. These are two different things, right? Objectively, right, we can measure the mass of a leaf. Like I'm looking at a tree right now, so that's why I'm thinking of this, right? We can measure the mass of a leaf. We can do this measurement. If we do it objectively, we're going to get the same measurement regardless of how we do it. We could do that in grams. We could do it in pounds. We could do it in ounces, whatever, right? Subjectively, the leaf is green, right? We can measure that the wavelength of the light being reflected off the leaf is of whatever wavelength, right? Can we say what green is? No. Do we know that green is associated with that wavelength? Yes. That's as close as we can get, but that also requires all of us to agree, hey, this wavelength is what we call green, right? It's this spectrum of light. So at any given point in time, there is objective truth, which does not contain meaning. You cannot get meaning is a subjective thing, right? Hey, the leaves are green. What does that mean? The leaves are green, right? The light bouncing off these leaves bounces off at this wavelength every single time.
And we measure it through some variability of red, green, and blue, right?
Yeah, and I mean, well, and that's also relative to like the cones in your eyes and things like this, rods and cones, and
but if you go deeper though, I don't think the source of the universe is red, green, and blue.
Okay, the point of that is that you rapidly get into a realm that is irrelevant, right? Like that is, for the sake of this argument, talking about the press, it doesn't matter. The point is that you have two parts. If you say capital T truth, there are two lowercase t truths. One of them is objective truth. One of them is subjective truth. But those two things, with our powers combined, that makes capital T truth, right? In my philosophy, I use that as veritas, which is verifiable, factual, objective truth, right? That's the Roman style of truth. You have the Greek style of truth, which is Gnostic truth, which is subjective. It requires you to know it, right? It's not measurable. Colors, smells, emotions, right? Those are things that are subjective. But if you put those together, you get all the bucket that all truths fall into. And so when you're talking about the different kind of truth from a data scientist versus a journalist, you're talking about subjective versus objective truth, right? Data scientists care about binary and electron positions and things like that, right? Which are objective.
Not entirely. So like in complex systems or chaotic systems, you don't have to exactly know every single chemical firing in every bird's brain for a group of birds to predict the general behavior of a group of birds. You don't have to reduce it. You just have to have a general scope of reference to make a decent systemic analysis. But the part I want to point out about the media side of it is that when we're in this world of social sciences and liberal arts and economics, and it starts getting in this realm of psychology and culture, these are all intangible, and none of these can be properly measured with anything other than, what type of formula used. But usually, at least when you start getting into that social commentary side of it, I would argue it falls way more in the subjective than anything objective.
Subjective truth. But those two things with our power. Yeah, well, and this is the thing, right? Meaning is subjective. It's always subjective, right? So this is the problem in history, is that in history, we talk about history like it's a science, right? We talk about it like it's a factual record of things that happened, but it falls apart when you start looking at it deeper because it's subjective, right? I could say objectively, there was a war between England and America, or the country that was to be known as America, right? That was called the Revolutionary War. When you start getting into why that happened or the causes outside of the material facts, which is like, hey, there was the shot heard around the world at Lexington and Concord, right? That was, that is a thing that we know happened, right? But it gets more complicated when you start looking at like who said what, and where you're getting the facts from and stuff like that. And then you realize like, oh, actually, there's a huge subjective element to this because it's like you could say that America was wrong in pursuing independence and that they should have just, like if you read about the American Revolution from the perspective of the British at the time, it'd be very different.
They're terrorists.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's the same, and if you're a terrorist, it's because you lost, right? If you're a freedom fighter if you win. Right. So it's all kind of arbitrary, right? And it's when they say history is written by the victor, it's true because true in the subjective sense, right? Not true in the objective sense. The objective sense of history is that there are things that happened. Sometimes we know what happened, right? When you get into why they happened, it's a little bit more vague, hard to know. Go ahead, Clara.
All right. You opened the door when you said the victor writes history.
Yeah.
So I have been studying along the line that the transatlantic slave trade did not actually happen the way that it did, and that the Black people or the Africans were actually here when the settlers came over, and that the slavery started basically because they were prisoners of war, not transferred over from Africa. So I've been studying on that. It makes a whole lot of sense to me because it just makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So
Chew
The
on that,
pro-
Garrett. Chew
I
on
want to
that.
know what you're
So-
learning though, because
Well,
I've been taught
Okay, so
a certain.
I want to color more what Claire is saying and why I explore that theory, that as plausible reality, is because a lot of civilization, I think, we're not properly taught the history. I think there's ancient civilizations, and I also think that, there was these global civilizations that existed before. So these bloodlines go way further than just saying, "Hey, the Spanish and the French and the Spanish just imported all the Africans," because that's not. There's a lot more history of like Pangea. There's like a lot of paradoxical stuff of like giant skull bones being found in America. And then there's kind of a lot of these, even some Native Americans had a lot darker skin tones. So there's kind of weird stuff like that.
So the thing, like skin tone is basically, if you look at the latitudinal line that a group of people lived in for the period of time before, like, I don't know, 1500, that's where skin tone comes from, right? It's literally just, hey, if you live in India near the equator, you're very dark, right? If you live in, I don't know, Iceland or Sweden, where you see the sun like 6 days a year, you're very pale, right? And that pretty much tracks. Like if you look at skin tone, it's a latitudinal thing, right? Which is funny. People make a big deal out of it, but it's like literally just what part of the world are you best adapted to live in, right?
Well, it's literally just more sun. It's like
That's it. Yeah, and people make a big deal out of it because of obviously like there's a really good book that I have sitting around here somewhere called Guns, Germs, and Steel that talks about why it's true. Basically, why the world developed in the order that it did. Like, why is it? There are like, the types of animals that can be domesticated and how that has to do with who was, like had different kind of cultural, technological development, and how, I don't know, it's worth looking into because it basically explains like, or it attempts to explain, all histories are revisionist histories, right? But it attempts to explain why Europe had technology first that other people wouldn't have had first, and it's not like it basically tried to do a non-supremacist narrative, which is it's interesting. It's a good book. So they talk about the advent of germs and stuff, but I would say that it seems unlikely just based off the latitudinal stuff because like Native Americans are very dark skinned, right? Especially, the further south that they are. But it does seem like sub-Saharan Africa makes you need the most melanin to survive there. So it would be weird if that were the case. I mean, there's a lot of things if that were true, that there are a lot of other things that have to be true. That it's basically the way that I look at stuff. If you're looking at like let's say conspiracy. So the flat Earth, right? Flat Earth is one that people love. I think flat Earth is horseshit. But let's pretend the Earth is flat. How many other things need to be true, right? Okay, if the Earth is flat, no one knows the Earth is flat. Every single person who's ever flown a plane has to be in on the conspiracy, because when you're on a globe, I have a ball laying around somewhere. Here we go. Right. When you're on a globe, you don't fly in a straight line from place to place, right? So if you're flying, let's say this is like America and this is London, right? You're flying basically in like a curved line up and over. And so if you ever see when people fly across the Arctic Circle, if you looked at it on a normal map, it looks like a really weird route, but it's actually just Mercs, right? So that would, all the pilots would have to be involved on this, right? In the conspiracy. Everybody at NASA is bullshitting. If the Earth is flat, Antarctica is bullshit. We could debate that. I know there's some sketchy stuff that goes on with Antarctica.
This is Garrett. This is one of the reasons why. One of my favorite things to say is, I don't know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I choose to believe what I think I know, but most of the things that we think we know, we can't prove. We can just agree with the hypothesis or the idea of the theory. So, yeah, I do believe that there is validity to the transatlantic slave trade being bullshit. There is validity to flat earth. There's validity to NASA being fake. There's validity to all of it, just the same as it being thought the opposite. So don't want to debate it, just putting it out there.
I would say, like, I personally, I could see Hollow Earth. Hollow Earth, I could get down with. That one is plausible.
Middle Earth.
No. Oh no, Hollow Earth though, because I don't know, if Antarctica, something sketchy is going on with Antarctica. There's either Nazis there or you could. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of like. There's a look into it. Look into John Boyd, or not Boyd. Maybe it was a different Boyd, but the guy who did Operation
Admiral
High
Byrd.
Jump.
Admiral Byrd.
Yeah, Operation High Jump.
That's that's one that's not taught in American history.
No, I'm sorry. And it's like illegal to go to Antarctica. Like every country in the world says it's illegal to go there. You have to get authorization.
UN approved. Yeah, the UN has to let you go.
I'm on camera, Ocean.
All that was recorded. Oh my, I said
it. No,
yeah, there's a lot worse stuff than that.
Antarctica is really sketchy. The other thing too is like. I think there's a non-zero chance that there's a lot of Nazis in the U.S. government. If you look at Operation Paperclip, the reason that we have the nuke is because we pardoned and hired all of the Nazi scientists. The reason we have NASA is the same thing. The Nazis had the first rocket go to space in like 33 or something crazy. They didn't have a person in it, but they put the first thing into space in like way before everyone else did. It was insane. Or like 42, or I don't know. It's insane, right? So after the war, all the Nazis got sent to the Nuremberg trials, except for all the ones that we pardoned and said we want to hire you. If you watched Winter Soldier, is it Winter Soldier or Civil War? I think it's Winter Soldier, the Captain America Winter Soldier movie. It turns out that S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually Hydra the whole time. I swear to God, that has got to be some kind of secret messaging where they're like, yeah, actually the government's full of Nazis. Like, I'm sorry, it has to be true.
Garrett, we can out there in Texas. I can tell you for certain they're there.
It just makes sense, If you look at what went on with NASA, look at what Jack Parsons and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. One of the guys who founded the JPL, which became NASA, Jack Parsons, was like an Aleister Crowley level Thelemite occultist. Like he was a follower of Aleister Crowley who was trying to summon Babylon, like an entity. Crazy shit. Also, he was murdered. They blew up his house. So it was not. I don't know. You can look into it. It's insane. But that's the thing. Space travel is, for some reason, innately linked to the occult. Like all the people who were involved in space travel, the Nazis were super into the occult. Jack Parsons, the founders of the JPL. Look at like the nuclear program. They were, these are people who were reading the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu scriptures, right? There, I don't know. There's a lot of
and
weird
it talk
religious-
in the Bhagavad Gita. They talk about this concept of locus and talas, and there's like declassified FBI documents about this too from the 50s. But it's essentially this acknowledgement through the intelligence community of that there's higher and lower dimensional beings or spiritual or entities or whatever that's beyond at least our three-dimensional or physical human plane. So that's a thing. That's a legitimate document the FBI released, and it's like ancient scripture of the Hindus. So
when you're talking about this stuff, pretty much the Hindus, the Vedic, like the Vedas, talked about it well before everybody else did. And so there's wherever basically India did it, that became Proto-Indo-European, right? There's a shared language here, which is why in India you have a mountain that the gods live on top of, and the god who's in charge has thunderbolts. It's like, wow, that sounds an awful lot like every other pantheistic religion ever, right? Well, it's because it is. It's the same religion, right? Zeus is who has the thunderbolts in
Did Garrett just say all religions are the same?
I mean, basically,
Clip it.
I'm trying. So Mount Meru is.
So there's theories that like there's a lost history of at least Jesus's life where he goes and visits the Hindu mountains in that part of the world and obtains this knowledge.
There's
That sounds like some good fan fiction.
There are versions of that where he goes to Japan as well. There are also many places. There's one in Japan. There's one in India. There's maybe one in Tibet where he is alleged to have gone after he resurrected, and they have his tomb there. But no, that's the thing. It's like people argued that he went to India in the gap year between. They wrote about his childhood, and then there's a gap until he's 33 or 30, whenever his ministry is, right? So if that's the case, then he went and learned the Eastern spirituality. I don't know. I don't think it's true. I probably would bet it's not true, but it's plausible. It could be, right?
I went to India for a couple months, and I went to this temple while I was there. Speaking of Jesus being possibly in India, this temple had, I can't remember the name or where it was, so sorry I don't have all the information, but there was a gold statue of a young boy, and the museum showed his story, and he walked through India preaching to people and teaching people barefoot. And it was about this young kid, and then as I went through and learned all the different stories, it sounded a lot like the Bible. Like a lot of the stories were very similar, maybe slightly different names, but it was really like on par for that. I found that really interesting. I'll have to look in to see what his name is.
I'm fascinated by that. I mean, I'd love to know what those were, Tabalo and B. Like, I think there's religious texts that are like approved by religions. Like the Quran wouldn't want like some random writing to be said to be the part of the Quran. And I think it's the same way like Christians would say there's a lot of like almost like a fan fiction in a religious sense. Like Amaru is one game, and then Zach's game is like, it's Amaru, but it's totally not Six Wing Studio. It's just a fan project. It's like, there's so much of that, and it all can sound very similar, have the same values.
All the major religions have the same archetypes, and like, for the most part. All of them have
they're based on how our brains work, though, right? Like, that is how we've developed.
So I was going to get into that. So they have all their myth and lore about apocalyptic, like the coming to enlightenment, all these things in different ways, shapes, or form. But at least with the Hindus and Christians, is like, as I understand it, Christ and Krishna is a description of a level of consciousness. It's not. That's not coming from the same root word, Tabala. That's a homonym, but not a synonym. They're not. That's bad. What does that mean?
Homonym means they sound the same, but they do not mean the same thing.
I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to bet money that Horus, Krishna and Christ are the same.
You can't
No,
just
no,
make
no.
that assumption based on it.
Dude, wait. That can be true, but etymologically, the words are not coming from the same thing. Christos is a Greek word, and it's like anointed one,
Right.
right?
The concepts behind these are so deep that the first letter can't be assumed to have any correlation.
Well, it's a K, first off. It's like Christ
the
is
first
K.
sound.
Christoph. But I'm saying the... No, sometimes
Get out of here,
they
Tabalo.
are, sometimes they're not. But Christos is anointed, I believe. Let me just confirm that.
Anointed one.
But yeah,
but phonetically...
However, Krishna, I would say Krishna Christ comparison is not as strong as like Horus. You'd have a better time with like Egyptian and thus Greek, and that, like, for example, Judaism is largely based on Greek mythology in the sense that, like, in Judaism, when you die, you maybe go to purgatory for 11 months.
Hold on. Israel was before Greece, right?
It's not. It's not based on Greek
I'm
mythology.
It kind of is.
It's
though,
not.
Sam. It is.
Explain that then.
Okay, well, look at like their entire underworld is
maybe
based off
Greek
of
mythology is based off of the concept. They've been around. They were around way before Greece. Biblical history traces back.
Hebrew existed before Greeks.
Yeah, it's a fact. It's not. They could not have based it on that. It might be similarities, sure.
You're speculating about something. One, we can't verify. Two, we treat the Bible and these scriptural stories like history books, and they are not history books. They are guides for our life.
What are history books? We just talked about history being written by the victors. But what's the difference between a history book and a story?
You were speaking of the Bible and stories in the Bible as history, like it was an actual person who participated or performed these acts. That's not the way to interpret the Bible.
You don't think the Bible's biblical stories are true?
I don't think that they're parables, right? It's not like
there's parables in the Bible. The whole Bible is not a parable.
Okay, so there's version control.
Listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It is not a history book. It is, you put yourself in every character in the book. The devil, the bad, the good, the victim, the conqueror, the person. It's all about you. It's not about what Jesus did. It's the Jesus in you that you need to realize. That's what the Bible.
I think you're talking about the New Testament, but the Old Testament is mostly a historical record.
I don't care what you call it. I don't care what you call it.
Well, I'm just saying.
So there's version control on the Bible, and this is something I asked Garrett. There's this huge freaking mega church over there in Westlake, Austin, and I asked the lead pastor this. There's version control between the King James, and before that was the Geneva Bible. In the Geneva Bible, there's the apocryphal texts that are not taught in Christian culture or not properly educated on, because it talks a lot of, start getting more into this fringe and edgy world of aliens and spirits and stuff like that. But in the Book of Enoch and the Gospels of Mary that indicate like Mary was a disciple and a lot of these things. But that's funny about the Catholics and the Protestants and all the fractals of Protestants that came to be in America is that they agree on that King James literature. And the reason that apocryphal text was removed from the King James literature, and this is what the pastor told me, that, it's just a kind of a scholarly theological answer, is just that the Catholic Church decided to remove the apocryphal text from the Bible, and then created the King James. So what you guys are talking about, as I understand it, is the King James interpretation, which it does, like as Clara says, we can't say it's a full history because it intentionally omits certain scriptures and passages that were just decided, hey, don't teach people about this.
Yeah, I mean, there are literally more translations of the New Testament or that of the Bible than there are words in the New Testament, right? Like the idea that the stuff is settled and that there's a clear narrative that's free from historical tampering is not only nonsensical, but preposterous, right? Like it's just not. There's
Like
people don't.
like God parted the Red Sea or something for Moses and his people to walk through.
Well, I mean, it depends. It depends on if you. It depends on your perspective, I guess, on the actual origin of the text, right? Because the same way you can look at any religious text would just be to assume that the things in it that we can't see, that we don't have a way to understand, are just mythology. And I think there's some elements to life that we don't understand, especially that being which is mystical, which is the spirituality, and religion deals with all of that. So the idea that things in those texts that are unexplainable to us are just simply untrue or parabolic is kind of like ruling out all of the stuff we've talked about in this club, where like there's so much we don't understand that there could have been a force that separated water, and to say like, oh well, that just didn't happen, there's no way, it's crazy, is to basically rule out that the possibility of any text that says anything like that happened.
That's not what I'm saying. It is laughable and it could have happened, but I think that it's more relevant if you apply it to yourself, like moving a mountain. The mountain's in your head. It's not a literal mountain.
I mean, have you read the whole passage around that, like the whole chapters around that?
It doesn't interest me.
Well, I mean, it's not a parable about that. You know, it has nothing to do with that. There are sections of scripture that talk about that, but like I've read through the entire Bible multiple times, and I know like that section is specifically talking about what God did for the people. I mean, it depends if you believe it's actually true or not. But
you're not looking at it from the perspective I'm offering, Sam. I'm saying that it is a psychological thing for you to process.
Yeah, and I've actually looked at it from both perspectives.
I mean, from a scientific or historical perspective, there's literally no evidence that this has ever happened whatsoever.
There's not evidence for a lot of things. Like that was the whole point of what I just explained.
Right, and there are a lot of things where the incentive for people to lie is quite a bit higher than it is for them to tell the truth. There were millions of
people there. There were millions of people, and all of them believed it happened, and they all didn't think, oh, this was a parable. It was written in their text. Millions of people saw it happen.
But people know it. Not millions of people writing the text.
I know, but they all were proved like, yep, okay, that text is right, or they would have destroyed it. It would have not have survived if it was a lie.
Yeah,
where was the incentive to lie?
No one has ever believed a lie that millions of people understood happened. Like
a group of people can be convinced and swayed to believe a lie. You're right.
Yeah, how many people think that jet fuel can melt steel beams? Right.
So there's a lot of
how many people actively persist in thinking that exactly what we think happened is what happened, even though most people know? Like, how many people think Epstein actually did kill himself, right? Well, it's the official story. 100 years from now, it's probably still going to be the official story, even though we all know it's a lie, right?
Yeah, and JFK was just Lee Harvey Oswald.
What? But I'm saying, this
is the quality content we show up for, right?
The problem is looking at history through the lens, what we tend to do, this fallacy that we commit, is assume that everybody who lives right before, I don't know, our window of history has ended, is infallible and has none of the same human fallibilities or reasons to lie or alter things at all, right?
No, I don't believe that.
And it's like, actually, no, people, if anything, people are at least as fallible as we are now, but worse educated, right? They were less literate. They had access to less information. So if anything, even assuming they're the same amount of fallible, they were way dumber, right? Like
your point, just to cut to your point is that they were probably easily deceived too.
Oh, people, yeah, but that's not saying anything.
We still are. I don't think we're much smarter in terms of
easily deceived, right? That's the whole point of the propaganda thing.
Here's a distinction about propaganda of the past and propaganda of the modern information age. In the past, you could obscure or omit information. You can't do that today. So basically, the strategy they do today is overwhelm the information flow for operational security. So these are distinctions. Like the church could easily just say like, cover it up, kill the person, do the hada. But today it's like, hey, just overwhelm it with a bunch of junk mixed in with the truth, and that's
Well,
basically how you confuse people.
The folks who are interested in confusing people now say it's easier to kill 1 million people than it is to fool 1 million people. Think about that.
Well, it's about how big this lie is, or how big the deception is, or,
I would
at
say
what
they're
scale.
They're equally easy, right? People aren't hard to kill, and people aren't hard to lie to. Like people
did
get
this
killed
go?
and lied to every day. Where does this go? I mean, it's just like history's written by the victor, right? Here's a fun example for you. So you're not Catholic, Sam, so you don't probably know all the saints and stuff. And I was not ever I was Catholic until I was like 10 or something, so I don't know. But are you familiar with Saint
Me
Bridget
too.
at all?
I'm Saint who?
Saint Bridget?
No.
Okay. I just learned about this because I've been looking at calendars recently, which is why I was bringing that up earlier. But there's a day called Saint Bridget's Day, which is allegedly this saint who exists, except it is also conveniently the same day as Bridget, which is a pagan festival that worships the goddess of spring or whatever. And it's very, very clear that the saint does not exist at all. The saint was created by the church, who wanted to adopt all the pagan stuff in. Easter is not, everyone thinks it's Ishtar.
Or maybe they
it's
named
not.
a day after the guy who did exist, but on the same day to replace it.
Well, no, see, so this is the thing is Bridget, the deity, the pagan deity, was the name of the holiday. And then conveniently, there's also a
Christmas is the same
Saint
thing.
Bridget. Well,
Right.
that's what I was getting at. So it's like, it's clear that's very obviously
But
falsified.
what do
It's
you
very
what
obviously
do
a
you
lie.
do when I don't know if I would say that it just equals false. It could be that was just was
There's no
replaced
historical
and
evidence that
adapted.
they exist.
truths that they believed.
I think
Right.
these myths and
Look.
ideas survive for a reason.
Here's what I'm saying is how much, like when you look at it, how much of what people think of is Christianity is actually has nothing to do with the religion. I don't know what real original Christianity looks like because all of the trappings of it come from paganism, right? So if you look at like Easter,
You mean the holidays? Like Easter is not a Christian holiday, neither is Christmas. Like this whole the whole
That's
like
what I'm saying.
Santa
What
and
is it-
sleigh, like
Well,
all that. That's not
obviously
a Christian
that.
holiday.
No, but what I'm saying, like Easter is Ostara, which is another pagan holiday.
It's not a Christian
Chris-
holiday either.
Yeah, well,
we
it gets
put
adapted,
things
right?
in, or people put things in, like the Catholics put in a parabolic scenario akin to, like, for Christmas, we just have Santa, like, that brings presents. Like, that's not real. But in the same way, you can have, like, a replacement.
not
What do you
talking-
do when
no,
you're, like,
I'm
trying to
not
quit
talking
smoking?
about-
You, like, add in a
I'm not
replacement.
talking about the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I'm talking about the actual, like, just trappings of all the holiday stuff itself is clearly stuff that existed beforehand, right? Like,
Okay, so I think we're falling more into the an assessment of the religious or cultural reasons, and I think at least for Santa and Easter, or maybe Santa specifically, Christmas, this is kind of like in the early stages of capitalism as well, that it kind of became more of a commoner thing for the common people, and it's just a great use to spend money. So
I mean, the holidays are literally just things that cultures come up with, right? They have nothing to do with the religion. They don't.
Well, so
They
the
don't.
religion is the
Depends
culture,
on
though.
the
This is the
culture.
thing.
Like-
People put a religious filter on their perspective on culture. So, like, the Christian world celebrates like the world that has that perspective. It's not like everyone there considers themselves a Christian. Millions of people celebrate Christmas, probably a relatively equal division of Christians and people who call themselves Christians, people who don't. Like, it is not part of the religion. Not at all. Zero place in the Bible does it say anything about Easter or Christmas. Does it say to celebrate it? Nothing. There's nothing to do with it.
So my belief, though, this is my belief, and maybe it's wrong or false, and I'm willing to be open to those conversations. But as I understand it, the tribes that were closest to Jesus, the Essenes, they were essentially ostracized and excommunicated from Israel.
Well, yeah, Israel did not accept
Because they were a threat to power.
Yeah, Israel did not accept that Jesus like was actually who the Bible says he is, the Son of God. Like they were like, nope, you're out. They excommunicated him. But then that like the people who actually saw it happen, who saw what happened in there, they're the ones who went out outside of Israel.
They basically
and the
said
message
he's a
of the
terrorist.
message of the New Testament was like, hey, the Old Testament was all about Israel was the chosen people of God and like salvation was for them. And then the New Testament is, okay, it's actually for everyone now. We've disregarded that, or not disregarded, but we fulfilled what happened and what was said that was going to happen. Now it's for everyone. And the own children, Israel, rejected the stone, which was the cornerstone, was rejected by the builder. That's what they said. The prophecy was in the Old Testament. That was written. So when Jesus came around, he was the one in the Bible that fulfilled that prophecy. Like, hey, the one that is supposed to be the foundation of the religion for this people is going to be rejected. And that was that whole process. But the religion proceeded to grow out of that following that saw and understood that.
Okay, so this is where another distinction I want to make as we use the English language to explain this. At that time, I don't think Jesus or Christ, the intention was religion as we think of it today, as our cultural, social hierarchies and institutions of power. It was a spiritual intelligence to nature and how nature works.
Yeah, I mean, here's
And life as a whole.
There's the core original religion is demonstrably about the earth, the sun, the natural universe, right? Hey, guess what? The sun dies and is resurrected once a year, right? That is a thing that happens. It's the precession of the equinoxes, right? Or the solstices, right? On December 21st, which the only reason Christmas is on the 25th and not the 21st is because somebody fucked up the calendars, which I learned because I've been researching the calendars.
Again, back to the holidays, which don't have anything to do with religion.
No, they do, actually. The religion has...
The Gregorian calendar was by the church.
What do you mean the church? Like every religion ever? By like the Catholic Church? There's so many we've just talked about. There's so many different things.
The Catholic Church.
Oh, the Catholic
all
Church.
Of the holidays relate to... There are 8 specific parts of the year, right? Technically, the 4 that matter, right? 2 solstices, 2 equinoxes. You have the world dies, right? The resurrection, which is Easter, right? Then you have summer, which is like this kind of celebration of life, and then it starts dying again, but you're harvesting, and that's the basis of like all holidays are about that. They all come from that. That's why Christmas is on the solstice. Easter is near the equinox, right? But it would have been Ostara, which is the equinox. The harvest thing, All Saints Day, All Hallows Eve, right? Thanksgiving, that's the fall equinox. Holidays are about the specific, like the parts of reality that occur on an annualized basis, right? That's everything else. Religion took those things and subverted it to its own purposes. But the old religion is about the natural world. It's about reality and this thing that happens recurringly, right? And that's the thing. The dying and the resurrecting God myth is emblematic of that, because it's literally the sun dies and is resurrected every year, right? It's how it goes. The moon is different. The moon is the feminine component of that, and the moon is like a waxing and waning recurring thing in a different kind of way. It's not the same thing, but if you look at like, religions have like a astrological component to the stories they tell, right? Like that's the age of Pisces, and now we're in Aquarius, right? Pisces is the fish, the Jesus fish, right? Leading into Aquarius, which is like the Holy Spirit being poured out on the world, whereas the fish was contained beforehand, right? There's Ophiuchus, which is it's related to Scorpio, but it's a guy wrestling a snake. That's another kind of salvific savior mythology symbolism, right? Is triumphing over the snake, crushing the snake with his heel, right? But yeah, I mean, it's like that's that's where all this stuff originates from in the first place, is just the world. The world is this kind of magical thing that dies and resurrects every year, right?
So that's a part of, I think, the challenge, like, and especially the original subject of like factual information dissemination versus propaganda for state interest, is that all these myths and all this lore and all this analogous explanations of reality that, you know, go from our ancient heritage, and no matter your skin color, no matter your bones, just as a human, humans as in general, is it's either true or false, right? If we just have a binary judgment. Now, if we have a quantum judgment, it's both true and false until we observe it and we render a superposition of true or false to it. So it's like, it's hard to say it's all true, it's all false, but at the same time, there's validity to these stories that are a core piece to how human civilization is shaped and formed and evolved. So
that was a good point. I clipped that. I think we should probably wrap up on that. I appreciate everybody for joining us. I actually just clipped that. I want to just say that was like Tabalo monologuing for a second, 2 to 3 sentences or so. Good time to speak and then let someone else talk. In these clubs, I want to just remind people that I am like trying to make clips for TikTok. So, you know, things you're saying, if they're quality content, will probably end up there. But with that being said, please try not to turn I love people turning on and off their cameras. It's kind of like adds some element of action to it. That's fine. Like turn them on, turn them off when you feel like you're talking. But don't turn on your camera like Tabalo did mid-sentence. He just turned it on like while I was talking. Because what happens is I have cameras arranged. If you're not on camera, you don't show up on the screen. Like, so when you turn on your camera, it bumps everybody and rearranges it into a 3x2x3 or whatever. So don't do that mid-sentence. It's fine to do it afterwards because I can clip the section. But don't turn your camera on or off mid like monologue. Wait for that person to finish, then click it on. Like that, Garrett. That was terrible.
we care about production value around here.
We care about production value. What happens is Tabalo got resized 3 times. So now when I clip that, if I clip it, I have to like go in and individually. I just can't even use that section as a clip. So basically, you ruin the clip if you resize it by turning your camera on and off mid clip. After they talk, you can do it. Okay.
Noted. Thank you for teaching us that, because that's all the stuff I have no goddamn clue.
I mean, I haven't told anyone that. This is the first time I've told anyone. So I think tolden, that's a new word. It's the first time I've toldened anyone. But yeah, Garrett, thanks again for leading some great discussion. I always love getting into this. Even if I get like really passionate, I do have my faith, but I don't push that on anyone, and I'm open to defending it. So I like this time as kind of like my chance to share what I believe and to get into like what is truth and what do we believe, because everybody believes something. Even if you believe nothing is true, you're still believing that. Like we all believe something, and it's interesting to get different perspectives. Yeah, B said thanks. I enjoyed hearing different people's perspectives. I got some really great little clips from that about, you know, subjective and objective truth. That was a really great conversation about the war and how victors write the story. I really want to get into more about like where the slave trade story has been written by the victors and where things were actually perhaps, you know, much, much, much worse than we even learned about in history and in schools. I bet you my history book growing up was written by a white person. Like,
speaking of
I would
worse
wager
than
to
you
bet.
could
I
have
think
imagined.
you're muted, Garrett. Or I can
Am
stop
I?
picking it up. What? Oh, my headphones
Can
probably
anyone hear
died.
me?
They were
I'm
beeping.
trying
I've
to
been
order lunch,
streaming
guys.
muted for
I'm
a few
so
seconds. Hold on,
hungry.
guys.
Wait, so
The stream can still
can
hear you.
anyone hear me?
Just I can't.
Tabalo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So
Anyways.
speaking of things that people
Yeah.
didn't learn about and don't want to know, this is not going to make anyone feel better. But
128.
there's that movie that's coming out, the Woman King, that's about.
Claire.
Claire's leaving?
It
Okay.
it looks awesome. I think she's on the phone. There we go. So there's a movie coming out, The Woman King, that talks about basically like there's in the colonial times in Africa, there's this group of women who, I guess all the men had either been killed or sold in slavery or whatever. So the women make an army and then kick ass. It's mostly a true story. The catch, however, is that group of people was also they were also selling other people that they conquered into slavery, right? Which I'm sure is not going to be in the movie, because it makes it, instead of this uplifting, heartwarming movie, it makes it really, really dark. But I learned that, and you have to too. So that is something to look into.
May I offer this? Every story that's told, it's told in a way that's gonna be for some benefit to control, undermine, and lead people, right? So I think about elementary school and the stories that we were told about pilgrims and how Thanksgiving came to be, and all of these fairy tales, but it's programmed so deep and it's told so well. Like America is the best marketing country ever. And here we go. A lot of it's now being dispelled. It can't be proven. People are thinking differently than what they've been taught. So I just always question everything. I don't take anything that I'm told for granted. And I respect everyone's beliefs. I respect whatever you believe. But for me, I'm going to always ask the question, why this? Why now? Right?
What I like about you.
Right.
You just can't take anything for granted,
Yeah. No, that's true. And every day I take at least an hour to do research or study on this kind of stuff.
And to reiterate,
I probably don't speak as much as I should in this discussion. Generally, I'm like recording or doing some clipping in the background, but I'm open to sharing a little bit more. Like if we want to get into some of the more like epistemology and even like historical evidence for different faiths, different religions.
Think about it. Think about this, Sam, and guys. Like some of the things that people are saying are lies, are so propagandized, right? They're so large. They built this beautiful 5-7-story African American museum in Washington, D.C. about 5 years ago. 2 floors of that museum is dedicated to the transatlantic slave trade. Kiss my ass. Okay, now why? So they want us to reenact the transatlantic slave trade by putting you in this little tomb and sending you downstairs. Like, it's so overdone. That's not the greatest part of me. First of all, that's not the greatest part of my history. First of all, but why do you keep telling this story?
Yeah, Claire.
Yeah.
I think the reason for these narratives to be the common interpretations is they want to prevent people from asking why. So like the less you ask why, the less the people who have benefited from all this have to explain themselves. And like it's funny that they're like black people get all concerned about the transatlantic slave trade and then forget about the global capital system that is still basically a form of slavery to all the entire world.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. That ding right there. Yeah, love you guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
I am so hungry.
I am too. Everybody needs to stretch, get some water, get some food. Responsibly.
And Garrett, thank you so much for joining us. If you weren't here, I was going to get off.
Well, I'm back. I should be back. I wasn't here last week.
No, we all show up for Garrett. I know.
We should be here going forward. So.
Garrett, we're doing on Sunday. I'm trying to get a group of the guys to do a philosophy club in a coffee shop in Austin. So if you're up for it, come
nice.
network.
You're gonna be in Austin?
Yeah. So tomorrow. I'm driving from LA to El Paso, and then Friday I'm driving from El Paso to Austin. I have a Lane 8 concert on Friday night, and then I have an alumni tailgate Saturday, and then Sunday we've been reading The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. So we're gonna it goes deep into all this same type of subject matter. So I know you'd be like, it's right up your alley. So
yeah,
you should post in Tribe as well. I'm gonna make some location-based tags for Austin and get people to tag themselves so you can post like, hey, we're doing for a physical meetup. Come hang out. We're gonna start the Link Raleigh or Link events. We're gonna do like a Triba-based event in Austin as well. So we'll talk about that. But go get some coffee. We'll catch up after the stream. Thank you guys for watching. And if you want to hop in, join these discussions live, go to discord.gg/Triba for some quality business engagement, companionship, and community. You need it. You know you need it. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.
There y'all.